Nigel Farage is about to hold an emergency press conference at 3 p.m. today. And if you think that's just going to be a polite discussion about local government reorganization, you clearly haven't been paying attention to British politics lately. This is happening because Labour has just postponed even more elections. Opposition parties are absolutely losing their minds, and accusations of democratic sabotage are flying around Westminster faster than expenses claims during a parliamentary scandal. I'm your host at UK Political Insight, and we're diving into what might be the biggest political row of the week. But before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on this channel. Thank you. Which is saying something considering we've already had ministers vanishing from interviews and petition debates going nowhere. But this one's different because it involves cancelled elections, furious opposition leaders, and the very real possibility that Labour is terrified of getting absolutely demolished at the ballot box by Reform UK. So let's break down this democratic dumpster fire, shall we? Here's what's actually happened. Elections for 4 new, powerful regional mayors were supposed to take place next May in Greater Essex, Norfolk and Suffolk, Hampshire and the Solent, and Sussex and Brighton. These aren't minor positions. These are serious roles with real power and substantial budgets. And they've just been delayed until 2028, not next year, not 2026, 2028. That's 3 years away. That's longer than most people keep the same phone. That's almost an entire university degree. But apparently, that's how long Labour needs to get things right. Now, if this was a one-off situation, you might give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there's a genuine logistical reason. Maybe the reorganization is genuinely complex. But here's the problem. This isn't a one-off. This is becoming a pattern, more obvious than a politician's media training. Other mayoral elections have already been delayed. Votes in Cumbria and in Cheshire and Warrington have been pushed to 2027. Council elections in 9 areas, including East Sussex, West Sussex, Essex, Hampshire, and Surrey, were already postponed from this year to 2026. We're not talking about one delayed election. We're talking about a systematic rolling back of democratic opportunities across huge swaths of England. At this point, finding an election Labour hasn't postponed is like finding someone in Westminster who hasn't been on Question Time. It's technically possible, but you'd have to look pretty hard. The government is canceling Democratic votes faster than Netflix cancels shows after one season. And the explanations are about as convincing as someone saying their dog ate their homework when they don't even own a dog. So Nigel Farage, being Nigel Farage, has already branded the government despots and is now holding this emergency press conference to state out Reform's plan to oppose the delays. And honestly, can you blame him? His party has been on an absolute tear in local elections, winning over 600 seats and taking control of 10 councils. They also toppled a 14,000-strong Labour majority in a parliamentary by-election. Reform is the political equivalent of that team that keeps winning matches only to have the league suddenly announce the season's being postponed. It's suspicious doesn't even begin to cover it. Zia Youssef, head of policy for Reform, didn't mince words. He called it a blatant attempt to stop big reform wins next May, and described it as an act of a desperate government who are clinging on to power by any means necessary. Those are serious accusations. He's not saying Labour made a scheduling mistake. He's not saying there's a reasonable administrative concern. He's saying this is a deliberate attempt to avoid electoral defeat. That's the kind of language you'd expect to hear about elections in countries that don't make it onto the nice democracy lists. But wait, it gets better. This isn't just Reform being upset. The Conservatives are absolutely fuming too. Kemi has vowed to fight the delay every step of the way, which is quite the commitment considering the Tories usually fight things for about 15 minutes before getting distracted by internal leadership drama. Shadow Housing Secretary Sir James Cleverly called it a scandalous attempt to subvert democracy by a Labour government whose credibility and popularity are already in tatters. When the Tories are calling you out for subverting democracy, you know you've really messed up. That's like being called lazy by a sloth. Even the Liberal Democrats are in on this, which tells you something serious is happening. Lib Dem local government spokeswoman Zoe Franklin said democracy delayed is democracy denied, and accused Labour and the Conservatives of a blatant stitch-up over local elections. When you've got Reform, the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems all agreeing that something's dodgy, that's not a conspiracy theory, that's a broad political consensus that you've cocked it up spectacularly. So what's Labour's defense? Well, Children's Minister Josh McAllister went on the morning shows to explain, and his performance was about as convincing as a £3 note. He insisted the decision was because of technical changes being made to deliver a devolution revolution. Technical changes, a devolution revolution, these are the kind of buzzwords you use when you don't actually have an explanation. It's like saying you can't meet your deadline because you're implementing a paradigm shift in temporal resource allocation. It sounds important, but means absolutely nothing. McAllister said the government didn't want to rush plans to reorganize local authorities, which is hilarious because Labour rushed through loads of legislation when they first got into power, but suddenly when it comes to elections, we need to take our time and get everything absolutely perfect. It's like someone who drives everywhere at 90 miles an hour suddenly insists they need to slow down to 5 miles an hour to look at a particularly interesting tree. The inconsistency is so obvious you could see it from space. He then had the audacity to say, this is not about delaying democracy in any way, and the accusation from opposition parties on it is frankly ludicrous. Mate, you've literally delayed elections. That's the definition of delaying democracy. That's like canceling someone's birthday party and then insisting you haven't delayed their birthday. The birthday still exists, sure, but the bit where people actually celebrate it has been postponed, which is the entire point of having it in the first place. When confronted with Nigel Farage calling them despots, McAllister responded with, well, I say, Nigel, pull the other one, which is absolutely brilliant political strategy. When accused of being authoritarian, definitely respond with a dismissive joke rather than, actually addressing the concern. That'll convince people you're taking democracy seriously. It's like being accused of not listening and responding with whatever. The interviewer then asked if he could see how it looked suspicious given Labour's collapse in the polls, and McAllister insisted there are elections taking place next year, which is technically true, but completely misses the point. Yes, some elections are happening, the ones Labour has chosen to let proceed. It's the selective nature of the cancellations that's the problem. It's like a restaurant that only closes on days when they know Gordon Ramsay might show up. Sure, you're open most of the time, but the pattern is pretty obvious. He claimed it would be a rush to push for mayoral elections now rather than get it right, which raises the obvious question, how did we manage elections during World War II, but can't manage them now during a local government reorganization? We literally held a general election while fighting the Nazis. Soldiers voted from battlefields. But apparently in 2024, with all our technology and infrastructure, having mayoral elections while shuffling some council boundaries is just too complicated. Make it make sense. McAllister also insisted they're not delaying the money that's going into those communities, which is lovely, but nobody's complaining about delayed funding. They're complaining about delayed democracy. It's like someone stealing your car and saying, don't worry, I've still topped up the petrol. That's not the issue, mate. The issue is you've nicked the car. Here's what this all comes down to. Labour won a massive majority in July. By all accounts, they should be confidently governing with that mandate. But instead, they're canceling elections left and right, their ministers are struggling through interviews, and their poll numbers have collapsed faster than a Jenga tower in an earthquake. The political reality is that if these mayoral elections went ahead, there's a very real chance Reform would win several, if not most of them. And that would be a massive story. It would dominate the news cycle. It would raise serious questions about Labour's mandate and popularity. So instead of facing that possibility, they've postponed them. And they're dressing it up as administrative necessity when everyone can see it's political calculation. It's like a student postponing their exams, claiming they need more time to prepare, when really they just haven't studied and know they'll fail. The excuse is technically plausible, but the timing is so convenient that nobody actually believes it. The broader pattern here is genuinely concerning. We're watching a government with a huge parliamentary majority systematically avoid testing their popularity with actual voters. They've delayed mayoral elections until 2027 and 2028. They've postponed council elections from 2024 to 2026. They've moved votes that were scheduled, campaigned for, with candidates selected, and pushed them years into the future. At what point does this stop being administrative reorganization and start being deliberate democratic avoidance? Nigel Farage's emergency announcement at 3 p.m. is going to be fascinating because he's got genuine ammunition here. This isn't him being hyperbolic for the sake of headlines. This is a situation where millions of voters have had scheduled elections canceled, and the beneficiary of those cancellations is the government that made the decision. Even if Labour's intentions are pure as driven snow, the optics are absolutely terrible. And in politics, optics matter almost as much as reality. What reform will likely announce is some kind of legal or political challenge to these delays. They might threaten judicial review, they might launch a massive public campaign, they might coordinate with the other opposition parties to create maximum pressure on the government. Whatever it is, it's going